Well, hello everybody. Good morning to you on this Thursday morning, January 7th. Is that right? Yes, it is. January 7th. Jeremy and Wendy, good morning. Who else is going to arrive here? The numbers are going up and only one name has arrived so far on this dark morning. I love being out here in this space. It just works perfectly, but this time of year, it's pretty dark at 7 a.m. Barbara Richardson, welcome. Jim and Kathy Fuente, good morning. Jan Akins, good morning to you. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're still continuing in our rule of life discussion. And the four major categories of how I order my life, and hopefully some of this is transferable to people. Stacy Riggle, good morning to you, Terry and Stacy. It's all structured under the principles of loving the Lord my God with all of my heart, mind, soul, and strength. That my primary focus, my primary identity, my value is found in God, my relationship with God, abiding in Jesus. And then the second command that Jesus talks about is loving my neighbor as myself. So loving God and loving people is at the heart of this. And so in the four categories I've talked about is talking about my spiritual health, my relational health. Thirdly, we talked about yesterday my personal life, how I order my life decisions and so on. There's a lot of overlap in these areas, but doing everything for the glory of God, everything to bolster my relationship, my love with God, having Jesus the center of everything, and loving other people well. The fourth category that is a part of my rule of life is those things that are related to my work life. And this is probably the most, or at least maybe the least identifiable area, as far as like you identifying with me, because my entire work is pastoring, studying the Bible, leading, shepherding, so that's what I've been released to do by Grace Fellowship. So I'm so grateful for all that, but that might be a little unrelatable. So I'm going to talk in some general principles, but I'm going to talk specifically about something, and that's regard to generally the things that are in the work category have to do with how do I do what I do well. So I'm going to read for you Colossians from chapter 3, which I think is a verse that relates specifically to this. So now in all areas of life, Colossians 3:17 applies, and that says this: whatever you do in word or deed, so that pretty much covers everything. Whatever you do in word or deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. So everything is done with this sense of Jesus, abiding in Jesus, Jesus being at the center of everything. Whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. But then Paul talks about other spheres of life, your family life, and then he moves to your work life. And he says this about your work. He says, whatever you do, this is verse 23, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. So again, keeping Jesus at the center, even in our workplace. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. So I've loved this verse as it relates to just someone who has a great work ethic, not just great work ethic, but you're continually trying to improve how you do things. You're adding skills to your life. You're doing your job with great efficiency, because all of that brings glory to God. And according to verse 23, we will receive a reward, a special reward in heaven for doing our job well. So there's so many principles that are regarding this, and I've spent my entire life, my entire career, trying to do what I do for the glory of God. And for me, that means I've gone to school, I've sought out extra education, I've studied my entire life. I mean, if my primary role is to teach the Bible, I've studied it and studied it and studied it, and I will continue to study it until I take my last breath, so that I can continue to develop my ability to communicate it well. So that principle applies to no matter what we're doing, whether that we're raising kids, we're managing a household, we're punching in the clock at work, whether it's manual labor all the way up to upper management. Are we developing our skills to do our job well? And I think the other part of that, the big picture part of that, is, are we balancing work with the other priorities of our life, our personal life, our family and relationships, our walk with God, all those things. That our work should not be disconnected from our life in Jesus. And we think, well, in my workplace, I can't tell people about Jesus because I'll get fired. That preaching the gospel in your workplace is far more than talking to everybody about Jesus. It really, the foundation of it is, how do we live a life of integrity doing our job well? That creates a platform. How do we treat other people? That creates a platform for the gospel. It's no secret that you're a Christian. People know it. And if you aren't doing your job well, that looks poorly on Jesus. If you're not managing your household well, that looks poorly on Jesus. In fact, that's why one of the criteria of leadership in the local church is, are you managing your household well? And so, are you making good, wise decisions in your own house and the relationships that are there? And so, those are kind of the broad principles. I'm going to talk a very specific thing that that is something I'm working on all the time, that I think are limiters in my own leadership ability. And I've talked about one already, and that is my propensity to seek approval. That will limit my ability to lead. If I feel like my decisions and my ministry life is constantly in need of validation from someone else, I'm going to be very limited in how well I can lead. And we've already talked about this, that when that happens, I have to send down my anchors of my true identity. What my identity in Jesus. Who am I? Where does my value come from? So that I can feel self-validated, because I'm validated by God himself. I'm secure in my identity, and therefore I don't require your validation. Now, it's still good to receive validation. It's a way we affirm good behaviors that affect and decisions that affect other people. So, it's not bad to seek validation, but we don't require it to feel good about ourselves or feel like, we're okay. We have value. And so I've already talked about that. But there's another part that I haven't talked about yet that affects my job that is really important, and that is that I have a avoidance of conflict. I don't like feeling conflict, and where that comes up is often is if I perceive someone has a different viewpoint than me, or if someone in ministry teams are exhibiting unhealthy behavior. I have to overcome an internal struggle to talk with someone about their not necessarily opposing viewpoint, but we'll say an alternate viewpoint. And maybe I have my own viewpoint that I feel pretty strongly about, and somebody has a different viewpoint. If my viewpoint and my identity are enmeshed, I'll have a difficulty hearing someone else's viewpoint. And when they advocate for a viewpoint that's different than mine, if my identity and my viewpoint are enmeshed, I will feel personally attacked or rejected because someone is simply offering an alternate viewpoint. And so, first of all, to help with conflict avoidance for me, and to embrace conflict and the importance of working through it in a healthy way with people, making decisions, calling out unhealthy behavior, things like that, I have to detach from my need of their approval, and I have to detach my viewpoint from my personal identity. And so here's a tool that I have learned to be very effective. Now, it's something I'm continually applying, and I think this whole conflict avoidance thing in me is pretty hardwired, so I'll have to probably deal with it my entire life, but I'm aware of it. And so here's one of the tools that have been brought to my attention that I have found to be very important and helpful in resolving conflict. And that's the tool of inquiry versus advocacy. This is so important because we have a particular viewpoint and we will advocate for that viewpoint. When someone else has a different viewpoint, they will advocate for that viewpoint. If you have two people that are only in advocating mode, you never really resolve anything. You can talk for an hour and everybody is, I'm not really listening to you. I'm just planning my next rebuttal statement. At the end of the hour, you just come away from, well, we just will have to agree to disagree. And neither of you have budged from your position. Neither of you are better. And in some cases, you'll even part ways, depending on how closely your viewpoint is to your identity. Let me tell you how this affects me in ministry. I'll say that it affects me with regard to even the gospel of Jesus Christ. I don't like conflict. If my telling someone about Jesus makes me feel uncomfortable, that's conflict. If it makes them feel uncomfortable, that's conflict. I don't like conflict, and so it's hard for me to share the gospel because the gospel is so close to my own personal identity. My viewpoint of the gospel is so close to my personal identity. If they reject the gospel, it feels like they're rejecting me. Now, it's okay that my viewpoint I'm holding very dearly and I feel like it's truth. But the reality is the Bible tells us that the gospel, belief in Jesus, is by faith. And so I'm going to take faith and I'm going to align it to the category of an opinion. Because it's by faith, it means that it's not a slam dunk. It's not something that is everybody can see. It's not like math. 2 + 2 always equals 4. You have to take all of the information, weigh it, and then decide whether you believe it or not. Now, the Spirit of God is a part of this. There's a supernatural element, obviously, but I'm putting it out there as this is a viewpoint akin to an opinion because it's by faith. And so you offer information, somebody else might have a different viewpoint. How do we navigate that conflict? How do I overcome some of the obstacles I have in that area? Inquiry versus advocacy. So I've talked a little bit about advocacy. We all are, we work hard at our advocacy. We try to come up with that bulletproof argument for our viewpoint. For instance, the gospel and so on. But one of the inhibitors of sharing the gospel is that we feel like they're going to have a better argument. And this is where inquiry comes in. This is why inquiry is so powerful in all of conflict management. It's simply asking questions of the other person to clarify their viewpoint. So many times somebody will say something that is akin to their viewpoint, and we assume we know all of their viewpoint. They say one or two words, and that's enough of a trigger for us to say, oh, you're a blank. You believe blank. We just assume everything that they believe or stand for and so on based upon a couple of things that they say. And so now we have our advocating viewpoints that we're going to start selling. I would propose that we follow a different path than that. I would propose that we follow a path of inquiry. When someone has a different viewpoint, I think it's important for us to ask questions, clarifying questions. Oh, that's an interesting viewpoint. Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that statement to be true? And it helps a person feel heard. Like you're interested in my viewpoint, though I know you have an alternate viewpoint. And all of a sudden, it's endearing is not the right word, but it's disarming. Conflict is two opposing ideas, two opposing viewpoints, right? So asking, inquiring, what do you mean by this? If there's a statement they make that makes you think a certain thing, make an assumption, we clarify that assumption by saying, what did you mean by this statement? So asking questions, inquiring when there's two different viewpoints is such a vital, important thing. It disarms. It doesn't, so that things don't escalate. We're not simply advocating for our position and creating better arguments. We're actually learning about what this person, who is a unique individual, actually thinks. And this becomes very helpful because it clarifies for themselves, why do I think that? It becomes a very interesting conversation versus an adversarial conversation. And so this is a tool that I think is just very helpful in resolving what potentially could be a conflict, or at least the discomfort of the escalation of a conflict, is simply by asking questions and then in turn listening. Not listening so you can make a comeback statement, but listening to understand. I'm seeking to understand you while retaining my own opinion about this viewpoint. And if we have this posture of a learner, that we're listening and seeking to understand, then and we're not holding our viewpoint with ironclad fists, then we can use that information to help inform my own viewpoint. Maybe my viewpoint needs to be adjusted, tweaked, whatever that looks like. If I'm so into advocacy, I can never even grow. I can never see the maybe some of the chinks in my own armor, the cracks in my arguments. I can never see it. I could never see maybe some of the hypocrisy or the contradictory ideas maybe that I hold, unless I'm in an inquiry type of conversation. And sometimes it means learning that other person's point of view. This is such an absolute vital, I think, tool. I think it works in marriage. How many times do I assume what Martha thinks by something she said or did, and I just assume, and I take offense, or I start arguing for a viewpoint when she's like, "What are you talking about? I didn't mean anything by that statement. I didn't mean what you think I meant." So even in very close relationships, friendships, doesn't have to be opposing viewpoints. It just can be an alternate viewpoint. It's inquiry is a powerful tool that brings people together versus creating a greater conflict that needs to be there. And this understanding, I'll close with this: this understanding that your viewpoint is not the same as your identity. And if they reject your viewpoint, they're not rejecting you. If you have a different viewpoint than someone else, you can say, we can still be friends. We can still enjoy one another's company. We just don't think the same way about this particular topic. Unfortunately, not everybody feels that way, and maybe you don't feel that way. And so I've had plenty of people distance themselves from me because they didn't like my viewpoint. And that's painful, and there's appropriate emotions of sadness that come along with that. But we shouldn't allow those things to make us feel invalidated. And that's where our identity comes back into play. And we have to send down those anchors that where's my true value coming from. So I'm hopeful that's a tool with regard to the workplace. I think relationships obviously are there too. But it's just an area of my life that I'm always working on, and that's one tool that I found to be very helpful in meetings and when we're discussing different viewpoints and how to best make a particular decision. Inquiry has to be present. We can't just think about advocacy. So God bless you today, and I hope your day is well. Live well, live with Christ at the center today. And we'll be back here on Monday morning. Have a great weekend.